Thank you, Professor Alex. Thank you, Vivek, for joining us. In terms of a quick formal introduction, Professor Alex has been both a mentor advisor for us at Ashton and a professor at NUS University. He's been a very eminent practitioner of cloud and technology and been an advisor to the CIO community in Singapore and Southeast Asia area. Uh, Professor um, and on the other side, we have Vivek. Vivek is the CEO and founder of Pentester Academy, and he has been one of the key persons in that specific area, leading the education technology more from an experiential learning. I think what we wanted to do here today is you know given the fact that we all have no coronavirus has come in, and the prevalence or the adoption of educational technology has significantly gone up. Wanted to have both of you come in, both from very different perspectives. One more from a formal education perspective, and Vivek coming from more experiential, education, and from that perspective, clearly we have more than a billion students globally who are going to be affected by coronavirus and adopting educational technology. We wanted to peel the onion a little more in terms of edtech and its trends, and figure out broadly the strength and the negatives of edtech, right? Um, to start with, just wanted to get the ball rolling. Just wanted your perspective of how do you think in the past 2 months, edtech has taken up, especially in the recent times, right? Both in terms of adoption as well as in terms of some of the challenges. If Professor, you could articulate it first from a educational perspective, and then Vivek.
Yes, yes. As I said, as I mentioned on the email, when we exchange email, what I will do is I will tell all the problems, and then Vivek will tell the solutions. Because I experienced firsthand the problems, all right, because I was teaching in the NUS. Yeah. So one of the first impact on when this coronavirus first came in, it was still mild in the beginning, right? So measures had to be taken, and the immediate measure was to for the purpose of contact tracing, we have to make sure, firstly, we need to have a very good attendance marking system, and a system to exactly identify which student is sitting at which position. So in case anybody has contracted the coronavirus, then we will know who is sitting on his left, right, and behind and in front. So that was one of the early stages before you want to talk about education technology. But I suppose attendance taking, location of student could be also education technology. I don't know how it goes, but eventually, yes. Then after that, the government said, okay, now we limit your class size to 50. All right. If you have more than 50 students, you are not allowed to conduct the class. You have to go home and do it online. And
Right.
therein is a problem. I mean, we have been talking about online teaching, e-learning for years, all right? But nobody actually took it very seriously. That is the problem. Nobody actually. So I would say majority of the professors were caught off guard, yeah. Say, oh, now suddenly it's not, if you wish, you can do online teaching. You have to. Okay, that was the first thing. That then we have to start learning whether you want to be synchronous or asynchronous. Okay, there are two modes, right? Synchronous, that means the student must be there and then you teach, and then they can interact with you. Or the other one is the actually record and then put it onto the portal for them to access. But later we can discuss the pros and cons of all this. Yeah. I'm just talking the chronology of how things develop. Yeah. Then after that, now it's not 50. They say 25. If you have more than 25, you're going to teach online. So for 50, it went down to 25, and then down to 10, and then 0. You just have to do, all have to do online. Now, for me, I was teaching a master's class. It was quite okay because my class was only about 53 students. But for the undergrad, some of the classes has 200 students. All right, 200 students, and then we realized the limitation of the Zoom or whatever technology, Google Meet or Teams, the limitation, all right, because we have never really do a stress test on all these systems in the past. In fact, everybody started, for me, my first encounter with Zoom.
Right.
After so many years in the industry, all right, I always use Google Meet or some other Skype, but this is the first time. So for me, it was a learning curve, and we realized that actually there were limitations. The 40 minutes limitation, 50 persons limitation, and we didn't realize that. Then it was a bad scramble. Everybody then highlighted to the Center for Technology, and then they have to acquire enterprise license almost for everybody. Okay. So that is already another thing. There's a procurement process, emergency procurement. Yeah. And after that, then we have this problem of laboratory tutorials where you're not just lecturing, you have to be a two-way. Okay. Then we realized that online teaching is not the same as classroom, because when you're teaching in the online teaching, we cannot see the student. The student can see me. I can't see them, right? If I have to see every one of them, then I won't be looking at my slides. So, you know what I mean? So, half of them could be sleeping, or half of them will be not there. So, I also do not know, right? So that is another problem. Yeah? And of course, later on, I will talk about the second part where we go into other problems, examination and all that. So this is the initial problem that we face.
I think, and that is very helpful, right? What you've articulated is there is a mechanism in which we've thought about formal education in a synchronous fashion with laboratories and others, and how do we do that in Zoom and other technologies? Even if we adopt it, there are just a host of challenges, whether students are getting it, they are interested, they are attending it, to all the other challenges. But Vivek here has been addressing and running this as a fairly successful enterprise and a business, and he's definitely adopted various different mechanisms to both educate students. I'm sure it's a fairly painstaking mechanism which cannot be switched on and off. I'd like to know your experience over the past 2 months especially, but would like to if you can address some of the concerns that Professor also articulated in terms of synchronous education.
Right. So Harshit, Professor Alex definitely has a lot of good points. So in our case, primarily we have professionals who are actually attending our courses as opposed to students, but there are some similarities, of course. So if you kind of look at it, for working professionals at this point, it's also important to understand what worries them, right? With an impending recession, many of them are worried that they're going to lose jobs. So this is also something which acts as a tailwind for people to upskill, because they figure that, if we are better in skills than everybody else, then probably, the chances of us losing a job, and even if we did, finding another might be easier. So what we've been seeing is a massive uptake where professionals are signing up on their own and seem to be a lot more engaged with our on-demand content. So these are recorded videos and labs which they can play by themselves. There is no live interaction. Additionally, enterprises are also trying to see how they can start engaging their workforce. So imagine these very, very large consulting companies, big fours, right? Thousands of these consultants are all just sitting and waiting. Probably nothing much to do. So we've also seen enterprises come in and say, can we do something more? And that's also kind of helped. So what we've been seeing is, of course, the on-demand model works very well for, a lot of professionals. Additionally, we've seen a massive demand for live classes, because when a person is, sitting at home 24 hours a day for the last 60 days and has no idea when he's going to go back to office, what he probably misses is a lot of the live interaction. And I think for professionals, this is more important versus students, because students always have their fun out of class, while professionals have fun, in the staff room, or basically, in the workplace. So I think what we've started to do is we are trying to run these live classes where we get everybody on video, as opposed to, just a webinar format where they might be listening, and then try to go ahead and make things a lot more interactive. And that is something which has kind of worked really well so far. Additionally, with respect to synchronous, asynchronous, I think one would have to offer both, because, if you look at a wide gamut of people, some people learn very well when it's very interactive, right? They're talking, they're learning, they're exchanging ideas in real time. While I think some people prefer to kind of, learn in a very solitary environment, right? Where they're sitting, researching, typing out and everything. So what we figured is giving both options acts as kind of a blanket net with which you can probably cast and maybe rope in most people. Now, as far as our student audience is concerned, of course, at this point, they are the most difficult, as Professor Alex mentioned, to engage, because I think students are also used to having, sitting in that class, looking at each other, exchanging, ideas, notes, fun gestures at each other and whatnot. So I think that will always remain a challenge for sure. Can online eventually replace offline? I doubt it. But here is the paradigm change that we are seeing, right? For most professionals, conferences were a very big place where they used to go for all their learning. And now what's happening is a large population, especially the older population of, let's say, 35 and above, who are very used to in-person interactions, many of them have now been forced to go online, as the professor was mentioning. So I think what's going to happen is many people who were very dismissive of online before this would now at least give online a second chance, and would look at online as something they will have to kind of learn to live with. God forbid, maybe there is a relapse of the same epidemic or something of the same proportion happens.
One quick question. While I completely agree with you, right? Like the working professionals for sure have significantly thing to benefit from an education, especially now that attending webinars is far more easier, or conferences is far more easier. So more education is flowing for them. But one of the questions that Professor had asked was, what should be the right ratio, especially in synchronous teaching, right? Have we, so kind of two questions. One is, what is the right proportion, and how can we make that more synchronous teaching more interesting? Because it's largely one-way kind of education. And the second question is, how do we have an experiential element or lab kind of mechanism during these online educations? Does that mean we have to prepare gamified scenarios up front, or what does that mean?
Correct. All good questions. So I think my recommendation is, definitely you'll have to lead with at least a small proportion of synchronous, and then give a lot of work to be done asynchronously offline. I think the problem with a very large synchronous system, let's say where you spend hours on a webinar or hours in front of a screen, is very soon there is going to be screen fatigue, right? And you don't even know if the person is in front of the screen or not, right? I mean, people can just switch off their video. So I think leading with synchronous, but also doing bite-sized chunks where, it is something where, you still have the person's attention, with you. And then after that, give them a lot of offline work. So that is basically, my answer to the first question. The second question, what was that again? I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I don't have something to write down, so it kind of skips my mind.
So the second question was more around experiential or lab-related areas. And do you need to develop a gamified application if you are a platform provider on edtech?
Correct. It's a very good question. I would actually definitely say a resounding yes, and I'll tell you why. It's very difficult in the offline world to keep a person engaged when he's learning all by himself. Because learning by, definition is a difficult process for most people. And that is the reason why you need real world teachers, classroom interaction, and all of that. So if you want to keep a person engaged offline, definitely a gamified lab platform where he feels that he's making great progress. So a platform where, badges are being awarded, small cups and trophies are being given, maybe micro certifications are being awarded, makes a person feel progress. I think in class, Professor Alex may congratulate some students and say, hey, you've done this really well. And that becomes an easy way for them to understand how they're progressing. While in a completely online experience, the notion of progress isn't measurable. And that's why I kind of agree with you. There should be gamification and lab environments and everything.
Yeah, maybe I can say something about that also. Yeah. Of course, when we had to force to convert our lectures online, but online, that means we are delivering instead of in the classroom, we deliver over the video. It's a wrong method, okay? Because I realized I recorded my lectures and then uploaded for the portal, and the portal has this thing, the download counts of the students, and discover that when the first time I lecture, all of them downloaded. The second time, half of them downloaded. Then later on, the next lecture, only 1/4 downloaded. So I think it's not easy to listen to a lecture of 2 hours over you get fatigue, as Harshit mentioned, fatigue. So that means if we are going to do this, as Vivek said, God forbid we have to do this for another 6 months, then we cannot do the same method. I think we have to firstly break the lecture into smaller chunks so that they can play only a small portion, every time, and maybe introduce some quizzes and gamify, so that we can at least put it in the learning management system to be able to monitor whether the students are following or not.
Correct. Absolutely.
One of the follow-on questions, Professor, what would you, do you think the teacher or the faculty community is concerned about the fact that their content or their teaching methodology in an online mechanism can be, it's kind of their IP, right? That can be stolen by others and used others.
Yeah.
If I'm a professor or at your university, am I afraid of that, or is that a concern for me? And what can edtech companies who are providing platforms do in order to allay that some amount of that concern for the faculty?
Actually, it's a great fear. And over the last many years already, there were a lot of people stealing our courseware and putting onto Course Hero, for example, where you can actually download. And then when we give assignment, let's say I give one assignment, then somebody has did a solution, they post it, and then next year, if I give the same assignment, they will just go to the internet and search for solution. So making our job very difficult. So every year I have to find a new material, because if I have the same material, there are more answers available. So actually, you're right. This is a big concern, and actually we don't like, the teaching community, we don't like to be 100% online. Yeah.
Vivek, how have you addressed that? Because the faculty, the teachers would have that concern even in your.
Right. No, it's a very, very good question, and actually, I think as a completely online business, we've faced this very, very early on. So when we had our recorded lectures, which eventually landed up in Pirate Bay and all of those places, right? And this happened many years back, and unfortunately, in our case, it is unavoidable because most of our stuff was on demand. So what we did was we created a slightly different recipe. So in our case, because it's applied cybersecurity, a large part of the learning is for the student to go into the lab and then work out all the examples in the lab, right? So what we did was we completely changed our video instruction, where as soon as we begin our instruction, we immediately jump into our online lab and begin teaching by showing things in the lab. So now what happens is, even if the video gets pirated, it's like watching someone else do the lab. And these labs are so complicated that you can't set it up yourself. So when somebody pirates it, they end up seeing the beauty of the lab, how much they can learn, but they can't learn themselves. So it's like watching a video game on Twitch rather than getting to play a video game. So by changing this, what we found that our videos actually became great advertising for the website. And a lot of people end up now watching the free videos, and in reality now we don't even care much if it gets pirated, because it's just going to get pirated anyway, whether we unfortunately like it or not, no matter who we pray to, it will go ahead and get pirated. So we've started looking at the video content more as a way to reach large number of people to show off our lab environment. And we've made all our learning lab intensive. So there is hardly anything you can really steal. And even if there are other, instructors maybe somewhere, as Professor mentioned, who may be stealing and using our stuff, creating the lab material and the lab environment is non-trivial. So my recommendation would be, if in whatever is being taught, one could isolate out something which could run in a lab and which recreating is so difficult that people just copying will not be able to do. And that way the students also start feeling that hey, we are getting so much. Just to add to that little bit, what's also happening is there is a lot of commoditization of content happening. And what I mean by that is there are thousands of blogs being posted, hundreds of videos being put out. So for a new learner, it is very difficult to distinguish between what is great learning material, average, and even what probably is providing misleading information, right? Because he doesn't know when he starts. And even from that angle, so what that allows us to do is put and syndicate our content everywhere, being looked at as thought leaders, but then after that, everybody needs to come subscribe to the service to do the lab. There's no other way out. So I think we have tried to make piracy our friend by knowing, piracy as an enemy will 100% mean we will fail. There is no way out. Nobody has bet piracy, right? The music industry with billions of dollars hasn't done it. We are just like, mere teachers. What can we do?
Can I bring up one extra problem with some of my lecturers face? When we are in the classroom, you look at the professor, and the professor go to the whiteboard and solve some problem and write on the board. So this one of the lecturer asked me, how in online I need 2 cameras, because first the student must look at me, I'm still talking. Secondly, they have to look at what I'm writing on the board. So the future EdTech must be not like Zoom, it has to have multiple cameras so that we can also sort of writing a solution on the board and yet do not lose eye contact with the student.
Correct. Yeah. Maybe something like virtual reality, it might convert something like into VR, and students can wear goggles where they feel like they're in the class.
I think something has to happen, especially because to make this experience much more better and sustainable, so that it replaces, the actual experience of that physical touch, and which kind of brings me to one of the questions that I wanted to ask overall. Do you think the adoption of technology would make would EdTech actually make education more a level playing field globally, or do you think it will create barriers, right? Because if you have to create such huge amount of curated content as Vivek is talking about, it's going to be fairly expensive and not be accessible to everybody, right? Having said that, just having a single way communication, as we talked about, does not truly make sense. It's not good for the students, it's not good for the faculty, and it is not giving value, right? So at an overall level, what do you think these challenges, and what will edtech actually bring to education as a overall? Do you think it's going to make it a level playing field, or is it going to make it even further divide?
Maybe I start first. Yeah. Firstly, there's no such thing as a level playing field in education. Yeah? Because education materials are available freely. Every professor has access to all this information overload, plenty of information. So even if they take the same material and teach, there will be a big difference if the guy is a Harvard professor or he's an NUS professor or some other university professor. The student knows the difference. And why is that? That's because of the knowledge of the professor, able to share story, application of the teaching, which is irreplaceable. Why a certain university is ranked so high? And I mean, professor you can hire, and all you can hire the same professor, but they will not come and join you because of the reputation of your university. So good university attract very high quality people. And why are these people high quality? Is because of the ability to teach. So the ability to teach is not replaced by technology.
Correct. So, I mean, I totally agree with what he just said. Is what makes education great is great instructors, not the content. For the most part, the same ABCDs are available for everybody, right? But I think what great instructors do is, add their own perspective on the subject, share their own experiences. And I think over a long period, great instructors also hone their teaching methodology, as they've seen hundreds of students go through it to kind of understand what makes things easier for people to learn and understand. The only leveler I think edtech can make is, I think eventually universities may end up opening up for a more global intake. So what may happen is, NUS may basically come out and say, now not only students in Singapore, we may actually open this up to any person in the world. And then you might see, students from Africa or India or, many places where they may not have great professors always available, may be able to now feel that they are being educated by the top instructors. So of course, see, watching videos is very different from live interaction in a class, right?
Yeah.
So you could go to YouTube and watch, edX and all of these, professors talking. I think that is the only leveler which can happen, which is this might be accessible to more students who could not have dreamt of live education from great instructors. On the other way around, which will it make instructors' life difficult? No, it won't. For the great instructors, it will be a boon. For the average and poor, they will probably be wiped out, which again, I know this is probably going to be kind of played, but I think it is a good thing, because I think the biggest problem in education is bad instructors. Because once you have bad instructors, they are not able to engage the student and, make the students love the subject, and hence, people don't do well. So I would say, in my opinion, this will allow us to chunk the concentration of great instructors who will now have a larger voice to reach out to everybody in the world. And the impact of solid educators can be a lot more if those institutions allow, people from around the world to join. Bad instructors will have a bad time. And that's about it.
100% I agree with you, Vivek. So actually, Harshit is not a leveler, but actually it allows people around the world to realize what makes the difference between a great instructor and a lousy instructor.
Correct.
So actually, it is good for education. Yes, because now good education can be available to everybody. And bad educators who try to fly by night type of thing, just take up somebody's material and start teaching, they will be exposed.
Correct.
Great.
Correct.
I think
Absolutely.
that is very insightful and great. And I think not just for the community which is in the education space, but also for young entrepreneurs who are thinking about edtech as an opportunity for them to kind of venture out into. right? This provides ample set of opportunities, whether it's in terms of experiential learning, engagements with the students, or examination and remote proctoring. So, any last words of wisdom for the young entrepreneurs who are wanting to get into the edtech space? Because clearly there are a lot of white gaps and pockets which are available and need to be plugged immediately in the edtech space, as has been articulated just now.
Yeah, I think, of course, technology, as you mentioned, Harshit, AR, VR, all this, I think will be fantastic tools to be introduced into edtech, so that actually, as you say, you can look at the professor 360-degree view, and as if he's in front of you. I think that maybe creates more excitement. And also, I think another thing which some of the students ask me, I pay so much money for to be taught by a professor. Now I'm taught by professor recording, and how do I know that I will get fair assessment? Because the professor doesn't know whether I'm active in class, pay attention in class, whether I participate in the project actively, or whether I copy my assignment. So the good students are feeling that, you say there's a leveler now. The good students are feeling disadvantaged, because they say that actually I'm good. If I'm in the classroom environment, I will excel because the professor knows how good I am. But now the professor has no idea. They just see 50 images on the screen. They won't know who is outstanding and who's not. So it's a concern that we need to address. How to help the educator still, despite not having direct contact with all the students, to know how they are performing. So maybe a VR for the professor is also very important.
Right. Yeah. Vivek, any words of wisdom for the new entrepreneurs who are wanting to get into the edtech space?
Yeah, I think, Professor Alex mentioned a lot of good points. Apart from that, I would say a lot of entrepreneurs try to put business before education. But I think, I've been an education entrepreneur now for over 10 years. And I think the only thing I've kind of learned is, for great success in edtech, make sure you put education first, put the students first in whatever you build. I think the biggest problem one could go ahead and attack is remote proctoring and exam, is simply because only part of the system which currently people absolutely have no idea on how to solve. There could be hybrid solutions possible, but I think remote proctoring is not something which people have cracked. I mean, I know there are a couple of proctor services where somebody comes live on camera and monitors you, but we all know it's easy for students who are very tech savvy to beat all of that. So I think, yeah, I mean, the proctoring and the examination part is a very, very unsolved problem. And whoever solves that first, I'm guessing, you're looking at another, from a pure business angle, a multi-billion-dollar company.
Absolutely correct. We had a lot of problem in our exam recently, just last month, with proctoring. So we do not know whether the students use unauthorized materials, and or whether the brother is sitting the exam for him. These are all the problems. Actually, if you can solve the proctoring problem, really, it's a multi-billion industry.
Brilliant. I think in either case, we are putting our brains behind remote proctoring now that you mention it, and we are working with one of the largest educational groups in India. And we'll come back to you guys as soon as we have a good, viable, and a scalable model for it.
Great.
Great.